take over at that point? I'm not going to stand up here
No.
while you're...
No, you should. Oh, sorry. I just want to show you the flow. We should tag team the way we do it.
Okay, that's
and
cool.
we can share the Fable part, and we're going to share the rest
All
of
right,
it.
great.
I don't want to just be like, and now Taj of Fable as well. But just look where it comes in. After we talk about Yorg, we do everything, our events. Now we get into some outdated digital shit, but we transition.
Yeah, but you know what we can do is talk about how...
Well, look. She closed our fucking windows? Sorry?
No, the audio on the...
Sorry, Gail just undid my prep work.
Somebody's been watching Netflix. You could just use a different browser. She'll use Firefox, we'll use Chrome. How's that?
Okay. Let me just pull it up, and then we'll do the test real quick. I don't want to be snappy, but I'm feeling snappy right now.
Good thing we didn't go to the park. Seriously.
Good thing I got some Advil.
I know this is going to take like 12 minutes to load the homepage. We're Ethernetted in. It's one of those Ethernet dongles.
Oh, it's a special one. Okay,
yeah.
cool. So I'm gonna pull this up.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll transition. So we'll reduce that. She's reduced. Once we get to
Okay,
here.
so she's not confused. Close that other window you opened in Firefox. 'Cause you opened...
Didn't mean to. She's going first, so I'll leave this up. But
Yeah.
so at this point, we'll jump over
And then transition
and
to
then jump back to the community. We do events too.
Well, I mean, because...
Or just let it go.
Well,
Or just move this up.
we could talk... that's perfect. That's even better.
And then we end over here.
Yeah.
Cool?
Yeah. I think there's huge potential for us to take a gigs at it.
We just need to, yeah, so I'm right on.
Because I saw people are with Philips, Sotheby's, like they're thinking about, like, they're representing collections and just thinking about what they can do that's...
I want to avoid the financial conversation, but obviously that's just the things that we're going to put through. There needs to be a clear understanding of the buyer.
Yeah, that's a case by case. That's a case by case basis. It'll be like every price.
So gotta get time.
else? What else? Okay. Hello? Hello? You think I know how to put this on? Hello? Can everybody settle down and we can begin our third panel of the day? What do you do? Hello? Is everybody ready for our third panel? I know, I hope you've enjoyed it. I mean, I think there's so much information. We're all coming from very different places, but hopefully there's enough universal information that applies to you and who you are, what you're doing, whether you're a photographer, archivist, all of that. So just a couple more house things. We have the sign-up sheet. So basically, panelists I'm fine with. If you are a member, you're not an APAG member, so I don't know your website and stuff, we're going to make an email, a list of everybody who's here. People want that. But I don't want to give out people's emails unless it's okay with them. So if you'd like to share your email or a website, and you don't think I have your website, basically if you're an APAG member, I was just going to put your website on, unless people really want to share their emails. That was sort of my thinking. But whatever you decide, if you would sign up on the sheet outside, that would be really helpful. Second thing is we're going to have breakouts. After this session, we're going to do another little coffee, just because we like to keep doing coffee to keep you energized. And then we're going to do the breakout sessions. So we're going to basically, I think these guys are able to stay. Mike and Taj and Gail are going to stay. And we also have Vanessa. We have all the panelists, Jennifer Stutz. We have Robin Moore. There's probably other people I'm missing from today, but it's basically more of a time for you to ask more personal questions or just to be in a smaller group with some of these, experts. So I hope you enjoy that. They're going to be in this room. We're going to have and 2 classrooms outside, either 1 or 2 classrooms. So all the assistants with the APAG shirts will direct you in the right place. So that'll go, depending on how long this goes, that'll go from at least 3:30 to 5. Something like that, 3:45 to 5. That's that. If you're not a member and you'd like to become a member, please do so. We would welcome more membership. I think most of you know I don't want to be a sob story, but we don't have funding. I really appreciate your registration. And your membership fees are basically what funding we have. We have tried to apply for some grants, so hopefully that'll come through. If you're an APAG member, we were just offered a field trip by bus by Mark Lubell, who is the head of ICP. So I know I promised that to our members a couple months ago, but now we actually have a bus to take us out to Jersey City, the far wilds of. And if you don't know what Mana Contemporary is, I think Mark told you a little bit about it. And there's actually Ryan, who's helping out a great deal. Ryan works at the Magnum Foundation, which is out at Mana. There's other, I think he said David Leventhal, if I'm not mistaken, or there's other photographers and other organizations out there. So if you don't know about it, it's supposedly a really interesting new place, and that's why ICP has a lot more space than they did across the street for the archives, for the 180,000 prints that they have. So that's that. Like us on Facebook as well, if you feel like it. Supposedly that's a good thing. And then, last but not least, we added in a little, not that you guys aren't mingling enough, but as I said, you came in from 12 states. I think we added, who did Ron? We added Atlanta. I recited the 12 states earlier, so 12 states and Canada, Ariel. So you all come, welcome to join. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, no, I didn't do Massachusetts. I have Connecticut, New Jersey, Alabama. Oh, Delaware, Peter B's from Delaware. Mexico, oh, I'm sorry. North Carolina, yeah, Alabama, Craig. Yeah. California, Jeanette and Jean, right? We have a lot. Oregon, I said it wrong, I know. Anyway, Brooklyn, yeah. So, please come have a drink with us. It's scheduled to start from 6 to 8. If we sort of end earlier, we can go over earlier. If we don't, it'll be 6 to 8. I hope everybody has, it's on, the information is at the bottom of your info sheet. It's Heartland Brewery. It's right down 43rd Street, about half a block down on the north side of the street. If somebody could read me the address, it's like 129 West 43rd. It's right, just before you write it down. 127, thank you. 127 West 43rd, but it's literally a half a block down. There's a private room in the back, in the middle, and we can all mingle for another 2 hours there. Light, hearty hors d'oeuvres is what they say. Hearty appetizers, hearty hors d'oeuvres, a couple drinks. And I think that's it. So Julie's, yes, John?
Point of information. I wasn't here last year. The breakout sessions are really just meant as something very informal with no specific agenda or result coming out.
Yeah. So what happened last year is we took the specific panels, and some of the lawyers even came back for it. We did sort of request that they come back. We didn't feel that we didn't feel that was necessary, but so we can break out within each panel. We can do this panel and have these guys together. We can have the panel that was just prior in another room. And it's basically, yes, it's just whatever you're more interested in hearing in a smaller setting, that's the point. If you have any suggestions about that for the future, let us know. But it worked really well last year, and we couldn't even get people out of the door, right? I mean, people were here. We didn't even know. They were like people stuck in a room with preservation, and we finally, we found them. Yeah. Exactly. That's how exciting it is. And they were preserved, and that's how exciting it is. So I'm really, I'm going to hand this over to Julie, but I am pleased to have the next three panelists. Gail, I know fairly well, and we've worked together, and Taj and Michael, I've just we're getting to know one another, so I'm really interested to hear what they all have to say. So I will turn it over to Julie, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, again, you have bios in your packets, so I won't repeat those. I know all three personally, so I'm going to show off just for a second. So Michael Etkoff's my long-lost brother from another mother. We've known each other for quite a long time. Michael and Taj, Daylight, they are real community members. They're very proactive in the photography community. They're artists themselves. They're very open and very active. Professor Buckland I've known for a few years now from when she was curating an enormous exhibition called Who Shot Rock, which ultimately was shown in the Brooklyn Museum, was probably the biggest music photography. You can't hear me? Hello? I don't do slow, sorry.
Then do your American
Well, it's
accent.
their bio, so if you can't follow, you can read the official version. I was just saying I knew Professor Buckland from an exhibition she did on music photography that was at the Brooklyn Museum, but they all have long and interesting backgrounds. I will hand the room over to them, and we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Well, hello, I'm Gail Buckland. It's obvious when two men are on the panel. I am not 150 years old. However, if I give you a little background, you may think I am, since my first major exhibition that I helped put together was in 1972 at the Victoria and Albert Museum. It was called From Today, Painting is Dead. It was the first big photography exhibition in the United Kingdom for 50 years. That gives you a little insight into how rapidly the field has changed when I began, and when some of the people, Alan Coleman is here, when some of the people began, we were not talking about a marketplace. There was no marketplace. We were talking about other issues to deal with photography. And I was very fortunate to be hired to catalog the Royal Photographic Society collection of Great Britain, which is one of the world's greatest collections. And that was basically acquired through donations. And even when I was there, every month people would be coming with photographs saying, you know, this was my great-grandfather's, these were some albumin prints that he took in 1860, do you think the society would like it? And then I would evaluate, but they were real treasures. I cataloged over 600 Julia Margaret Camerons, over 600 Roger Fentons that had been given over the years because nobody else wanted them. Actually, the Roger Fenton Crimea War photographs, they were in 2 albums. A dustman, Julie will understand that term, a garbage man brought them in. He had found them in the trash. And the volunteer who was the head of the archives, Dudley Johnston, gave him 10 quid, 10 pounds for the 2 albums, and then I had them in my collection. I actually worked with Mrs. Dudley Johnston. Dudley Johnston was an exact contemporary of Stieglitz, born in 1864. Mrs. Johnston had gotten to the society in 1917 to replace her brothers who went off to the First World War. She told me I wouldn't last. After cataloging the collection, I actually had to leave. She said, "I knew you wouldn't last." When I went, I said I would stay without pay for a month. Please, hire somebody to take care of it. They didn't for a year. Americans would tell me they came and visited the RPS, and Mrs. Johnston gave them a paper negative because we had so many. This is just a little background. When I say I'm really not 150 years old, you might think I am. There were no photography auctions when I began. I had mentioned I cataloged the Julia Margaret Camerons. I knew Julia Margaret Cameron's work intimately well. Sotheby's had 2 photographs. They were going to have their first photography sale in London. It was like 1972, I think, maybe. They asked me to look at these 2 photographs. I said, they're definitely by Cameron, but they look like they've been in a wet basement for 100 years. They were moldy. They were in terrible condition. They sold for £100 each, and that changed everything. My friend, Harold Evans, did the story on the front page of the London Sunday Times. Old photographs are worth something. And then nobody gave me photographs anymore for the collection. So I made it a point, even though the auctions began, and many people started to come in to look at the Royal Photographic Society collection, to never know prices. I would know processes. I would give an aesthetic opinion. I would say a lot about the image, but when somebody said, "How much is it worth?" I never answered. I said, "I don't know." And that's still the same thing. But I do work with collections all the time. I do work with wonderful people like yourselves who care passionately about preserving, protecting, and doing the best by the photography that they love. I'm on this panel because I like to say I've done everything from Fox Talbot and the invention of photography at the Morgan Library to rock and roll at the Brooklyn Museum. I've done 15 books. And why I think we're on this panel together is I'm really mainstream. Knopf is my publisher. And it's really kind of old-fashioned. I mean, they'll send out review copies to the New York Times, and but they're not really with it. However, they do real books with big bibliographies, and they give me the space to do the scholarship I need to do. Mike asked me if I work with one collection on my new book, which is on a history of sports photography. I said, one collection? That's not who I am. I spend 12 years on books. I go to hundreds of collections because if I'm about anything right now, it's about enlarging the field of photography, bringing in. The canon has traditionally been very limited, and there's a hierarchy in photography, which is ridiculous. I mean, when I did my last book, I put an incredible picture of Tina Turner on the cover, and I used to like to say, is Tina on stage any less lofty than an Ansel Adams mountaintop. I mean, it just isn't. And because when I was very young, I did a very important book called The Magic Image with Cecil Beaton. And Cecil, even though I was brought up on Tchaikovsky, and my teacher was a student of Minor White, and I was never part of Gurdjieff, but that's my background. Cecil Beaton was my real teacher, and he'd look, I mean, I remember the day I showed him Paul Strand, and Cecil said, boring. And I said, he's not boring. He said, convince me that he's not boring. So I remember staying up late at night and then the next morning dropping off these notes to Cecil Beaton why Paul Strand wasn't boring. And he agreed to put him in the book. He said, you've convinced me. But when I did The Magic Image, we were enlarging the field. And we were putting in many photographers that had never really they were hardly known. I mean, to this day, every time I meet Joseph Kudelka, he picks me up, shakes me up and down, and turns me over because we gave him such a long spread in The Magic Image, and we did it because Cartier-Bresson said, this photographer is better than I am. So I do have a lot of history, and one of the points I want to make is when I did The Magic Image, I had to write letters to almost every living photographer we included. And I just the other day, I went through some of my files. I have all these records, all these letters from every photographer, Ansel Adams, Minor White, whoever you want to mention, if they were alive. That's how we corresponded. And I really wonder what I'm going to have now when I do everything by email, what the records are. So that's something you should be aware of, printing out important letters, documents, dating things, because I, as a historian, need it. What else do I want to say? I do exhibitions, I do books, I teach the history of photography. I am constantly working in archives. A couple of things I want to say to this group is I have often wanted to work with photographs, and not just the copyright situation is very difficult, but the family situation is difficult. I have galleries that have said to me, Gail, if I don't have to speak to anybody in the family, and you're the intermediary, we'll give him a show. But they drive me crazy. And I think that I have no work unless the photographs are preserved. I have no work unless I know how to find you. And so as caretakers of archives, I think you have to work it out with the family. Who is the spokesperson? Who's in charge? It's not just the money thing, although money divides families. It's really history and sometimes antagonisms and disagreements. So to make my life easier, who do I go to? Now, how do I know where to go? This current project that I'm working on, a lot of the photographs are not the photographer's copyright, and the situation has become abysmal. I go to a place like Life Picture Service to ask for an original print for an exhibition at one of the world's great museums. They say, buy a digital print. I said, well, I'm not interested in exhibiting the digital print. Well, we don't care. I said, you don't care about the legacy of your life photographers? They say, no, we're a business. And everybody's a business now, just about. So I need to go to somebody else sometime. Life's not giving me the original print. Where's the widow? Where are the children? And there's one woman at Sports Illustrated, her name's Karen Carpenter, who cares a lot about past SI photographers and present ones. And she does her best to keep track of the families. But if the families don't contact her, Or they change the address. She doesn't know who to give the address to give me. So if the person you loved or who you were responsible for worked at different magazines, or if you know that those photographs are actually at an institution, make sure they're always know where you are. Because if I try to interview every living photographer in my exhibitions and my books, I have to track them down, and if I can't track them down, I try to track down the family. There's a widow here that I went out, and it was a wonderful experience, and she was doing a great job with the archive, but I was just lucky that somebody knew where she was. So that's a very simple thing, but really important. I love file cabinets. I love going through a million prints and negatives. And there's somebody from AP who recognized me. I used to go to AP all the time going through negatives, not even just prints, getting things printed. For my Fox Talbot book, if you want a little history, I spent 7 years on Fox Talbot. One of the first things I did was get prints. It's going to sound unbelievable. The Science Museum has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Fox Talbot negatives, and Calvert Jones and Reverend Bridges, and albums and things, but they never had positives. So I said to the head of the photography department, I'd love to see the positives of these Talbot negatives. He said, well, the only way you can do it is send it up to the photo lab, and it costs 35 pence a picture. You can get contact prints. So I got I made 3 contact prints of all the Talbot negatives, 35 pence a piece. I gave the Science Museum 1 set. I used 1 set for my book, and I had like 1 prestige. Do you believe me? We're talking Fox Talbot, okay? Okay, somebody like me really values your photographs, but I've seen so many millions. So not all of them are supposed to go into museums, really. Not all of them are supposed to be collector's items. Again, Cecil Beaton was a close friend. After he had his stroke, he couldn't work. He had always earned his own living. He thought, I want my collection to go to a state museum, a government, some Victoria and Albert, National Gallery, somewhere, National Portrait Gallery. We're talking Cecil Beaton. It broke his heart. No museum came up with the money to buy his archive. And he was juggling the money. It wasn't just a certain price that he needed. It gets complicated. And he sold it to Sotheby's. So what else do I want to say? I have over 40 years of working in the field, working with all kinds of collections. I think this is going to be my last book, I swear. I can't afford it anymore. I have 300 photographs in my book. I mean, if I gave each photographer $150, each photographer or collection would feel totally exploited, and I'd be down $45,000. And I've been working 4 years, and the numbers just don't make sense anymore. When I started, if I worked for New York Graphic Society or Little Brown, they would pay the usage fees. I would give them a list of photographs I needed for the book, and I'd provide the text, the captions, and they would get the black and white glossies or the 4x5 transparencies and negotiate the fees. Now, publishers give the author an advance, and I'm supposed to pay for everything. And I do big books. I try, as I said, to enlarge the field, to bring in new names. That's what I really like to do. I don't want to use the same old people all the time. I want to make discoveries. I want to show the diversity and the richness of the field. I don't want to play it safe. I'm too old. I don't have to play it safe. I don't have to keep on publishing the big names. They have enough books. They have monographs. Everybody knows who they are. They're in the auction houses. But it's so hard to do a book with 300 photographs and forget the individual photographers who think I'm exploiting them. Getty thinks they're a business, so they have to do business. So we have to negotiate. Now it's a business proposition, and it's really hard. And I will end by saying, in the last few years, my objective in my exhibitions is really about bringing new people into museums, into art museums. So do I know anything about sports? But I know about photography. And I know that when I look through an archive, I'm trying to find something that's not just a sports photograph, but that is worthy of the larger history of photography, that could be included in a history of the medium, something that stands up by itself. And so if it's, as one photographer, Robert Rieger, said, if it's somebody throwing a ball in Ebbets Field, you have to believe that that could be art. And that's the name of the game. With art, you have to believe. So I'll conclude then.
Cool.
Thanks, fascinating.
Thanks, Gail. That was a very interesting presentation of your work, and I appreciate getting the deeper dive. It's great to be on this panel with you because Taj and I have been working together for about 12 years, and we're also firmly committed to expanding the conversation around photography. We actually met up at Sarah Lawrence as photo students with Joel Sternfeld and started talking, took a shine to one another, and put our heads together and started a magazine. We're going to basically take you guys...
I taught there.
I'm sorry?
At Sarah Lawrence?
Interesting.
Sarah Lawrence didn't have any photo historian in their art faculty, so I taught photo
Excellent.
history.
Very cool.
Yeah, Sarah Lawrence has a long legacy of photo luminaries being involved, and I'd like to think that we're amongst the latest to come out of that school. Taj and I prepared a short presentation, kind of giving a 10,000-foot view of what Daylight is, what we've been doing for the last 12 years, and essentially it's cataloging this evolving landscape of photo publishing through our ins and outs and our experimentations with different platforms in print and online via multimedia and through events at our gallery down in North Carolina. So if you'll bear with us, we're going to jump up to the computer and take you through a little bit of a visual slideshow here. We're back.
I like the costume change.
The set was supposed to rotate, but I don't know what happened.
All right, so here's us 12 years ago on press at Meridian Printing in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. We were printing the first issue of Daylight magazine. We were, fresh-faced, and we didn't really know what we were getting into, but we loved photography, and in fact, we were connected with this certain gentleman. Some of you might recognize this photograph on the cover. He was actually an SLC alum himself who also studied with Joel Sternfeld. And
Alex Soth, for those of you who don't know the image. Oh, Alex Soth. Does this work? Yeah, okay. I'll hold it.
Alex Soth, everybody. So Alec agreed to be in our first issue, and we knew this was before Sleeping by the Mississippi came out. This is before his first show at Yossi.
Gotta really hold it close.
Sorry. Can everyone hear me? I don't even need this. Yes? Okay. We were the first U.S. publishers to feature Alec's work. And when he agreed to be in our inaugural issue, we realized we were onto something powerful and something important. And specifically, what Alec represented to us is an artist who was trafficking between the space of documentary and fine art. That is a more subjective and personal, long-form look at the landscape of America, at the themes of love through Niagara. I don't have to take everybody through it, but essentially, we felt like his practice was spot on with our personal interests and represented sort of the culmination of a trend, and we wanted to be involved. And so we got Alec involved.
And yeah, and I think one of the things that we really responded to in Alec's work is that he comes from a very sort of traditional, formal background as a photographer. He studied with Joel Sternfeld as well. That's how we met Alec. He is, an avid student of the history of the medium. Yet he somehow manages to not be too burdened by that. And he does engage his own personal voice and his love of aesthetics and nuance in looking at the world very objectively and taking this kind of traditional documentary or photographic, archival perspective on the subject matter. And this is something that we responded to and recognized within the field of photography publishing. It kind of represented a whole. I mean, there was a lot of publishing that was focused on, the aesthetic concern and art, capital A, and then there was a lot of publication done around vernacular photography and a much more sort of historic look at the medium, but no real publishing voice that sought to mitigate the space between the two. And so we recognized that was, not only what we were interested in, but also something that we thought might be worth pursuing relative to contributing to the field.
So,
What was Alex's last name?
It's Alec, A-L-E-C, and it's Soth, S-O-T-H, Soth like both. S-O-T-H. Yeah, Alec Soth.
so we're going to move through rather quickly and look at the various issues that Daylight put out. I should mention that with the first edition of the magazine, we secured international distribution, and even with a print run of only 3,000, we were able to put this magazine on newsstands all over the world. And it was, for two still undergrads at Sarah Lawrence, it was a bit of a coup, and we were really excited by the potentialities there. And we started to talk to other people and pull together the next edition, which featured the work of Susan Meiselas, along with a number of other luminaries in the field, in this case looking at Iraq. And this issue came out in the summer of 2004, when the insurgency was in full swing. It was very difficult for Western journalists to document what was happening there. And what we were able to do is send a box of expired disposable cameras to a friend who was a photojournalist, Daniel Pepper, photographing in the field in Iraq. And between he and his fixer, he was able to distribute cameras to everyday citizens in Baghdad and Fallujah. Now, interestingly enough, we teamed up with Pixel Press, which was Fred Richen's little baby. I'm not sure if it still exists, has any programs to date, but we teamed up with Fred and pulled these photographs out of the magazine and created a touring exhibition that went around to universities all over the country. And you could see we have, the Arabic as well as the English translation of what the subjects wanted to say. And the simple instructions were to give the American public a look at their lives and to show us what they wanted us to see. So it was trying to traffic between this sort of mass media look at this faceless enemy of the insurgency in Iraq during wartime, and actually put a face to it and show the inside of a school or this family that lives in a garbage dump.
And to also promote this work on with the same legitimacy, on the same platform as the work being produced by these luminary, celebrated international image makers. That was something that we were very committed to. And I think to Gail's point, they're some of the most iconic photographic material that is contributing to expanding the field that was made, decades ago being discovered today, is just as valuable as, the images that may have been, recognized and celebrated as luminary by figures who did break through into, notoriety. And keep in mind, this is before, CNN, iReport, and the notion of citizen journalism had become a part of society and the conversation. So we saw the need for this form of representation. We're believers that anyone with a camera and some basic sense of aesthetics is capable of making earth-shattering imagery, and we were amazed at the results, of that project.
So the exhibition secured a solid amount of press all over the country, and it went to these institutions. It's most recently been donated to the Archive of Documentary Arts, which we're very proud to have it as its final home down at Duke University. This is a quick shot of the covers of the 9 editions of the magazine. As Taj mentioned, we are interested in sort of equalizing that playing field and exploring new voices in photography. And we did that by theming each edition of the magazine according to our interests and sort of curating. It took us sometimes over a year to pull together the photographers included in each edition. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through each photographer included in each one.
I was just going to interject. Something that we did, I think, as archivists and those working with archives and related publications and the associated methodologies, was that we sought to expand the visibility for this incredibly important photography by calling Daylight a magazine, such that we could get newsstand distribution and we could have a global presence in mainstream magazine circulation world. But the approach that we took was much more curatorial, much more research-based. And to Mike's point, sometimes we would work on each of these publications for upwards of a year before actually putting out into the world the resulting work. So we called it a magazine so that we could distribute it as such, but it's much more of a sort of curated journal.
I mentioned our print run was only about 3,000 copies, which felt very limiting at some point. Our sell-through rate in the UK was in the high 60s, which is kind of unheard of for newsstand sales. And we wanted to sort of, again, expand our audience and get this important work out to more people. So we decided to try and work within a digital platform and created a whole series of multimedia pieces. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to play right here. Cover price was $10 in the US. Not sure who asked that. Yeah, we try to keep it accessible, and it didn't have a hardcover. It was a nice 8x8 size magazine.
We lost money on every single edition.
As is the way of independent photo publishing, but we can get into that later. So, come with us on a journey to Afghanistan. This is our 8th edition. This is just essentially a teaser of the print version of the magazine that also fit into the multimedia program. So we're just going to take a minute and watch this piece.
The Wakhan Corridor is a narrow strip of land squeezed between Tajikistan, China, and Pakistan, a wild remote corner of Afghanistan with 3 great mountain ranges. The Hindu Kush, the Greater Pamir, and the Karakoram meet in a spectacular tangle of peaks. In the winter of 2008, I walked for 6 days through cold and snow to reach a Kyrgyz nomad camp high in the Little Pamir. When I arrived at the camp, I entered a low, dimly lit mud hut to greet Abdul Rashid Khan, the leader of the Little Pamir Kyrgyz. He warmly welcomed me and said, "Before you were my friend, but now that you have come back, you are my sister."
Over the course of 4 assignments for the New York Times and the New Yorker, I photographed everything from heroin addicts in the streets of Kabul's Old City to Colombian counter-narcotics teams training Afghan police, and finally into the fields on 2 different eradication missions, one of which was with DynCorp mercenaries who were overseeing eradication in the most dangerous conditions possible. My experience in Oruzgan province was especially notable because of a 4-hour firefight that ended any of my ambitions to be a war photographer. On assignment for the New Yorker with veteran reporter John Lee Anderson, we were ambushed by the Taliban and separated from the Americans. Many of the photos in this portfolio document our time with 3 Afghan army officers and a Taliban prisoner as we attempted to escape. I saw on one side the honest attempt to rid the country of its opium and to impose the rule of law, and on the other side I saw corrupt politicians and police making sure that the fields of the powerful went untouched, while family plots were cut down by an army of men with broomsticks. The experience was a tragic comedy full of errors and absurdity and ultimately death. The Afghan drug war has failed.
George Orwell once said, "We sleep safe in our beds because rough men stand ready in the night to visit violence on those who do us harm." In 2007 to 2008, I followed the deployment of a group of US soldiers stationed in the remote Korangal Valley in northeastern Afghanistan. I ended up spending between 4 and 5 months living with the men of 2nd Platoon, Battle Company of the 173rd Airborne Combat Brigade. I had no sense when I first came to the valley that it was fast becoming an epicenter of fierce fighting against Islamic insurgents. But during 2007, nearly 18% of all fighting in Afghanistan took place in this 6-mile-long valley. Despite no running water or electricity, slowly the neighbors struck over their home. They slept out in the open on army cots behind rock bag emplacements and shared the very real fear that they might be overrun in the night. During my time with them, 70% of the platoon was taking some kind of mood-enhancing or sleep-affecting medication. When winter came, they built basic plywood huts and had a small generator dropped by helicopter. There was no road up to the outpost. Cut off, and in an extreme situation, these men welcomed me into their lives. I worked, ate, and slept among them, slowly gaining their trust and access to their lives. These images are a result of that intimacy.
In late 2001, I was one of the hundreds of young photographers that came to Afghanistan for the first time to photograph my first war. I was naive, a little reckless, and mostly unprepared. At the time, the Taliban ruled most of the country. The Afghanistan I know is a land of clashing contrast, of raw beauty. Its landscape scarred by centuries of wars, fought against foreign armies and with itself. Still, I continue to find myself drawn to this remarkable place and its people, to the remote sense of pride on being Afghan, and the hint of dignity and spirit that I find in most of the people I meet here, determined to carry on, however battered their experience.
So from this selection, you can get a sense of what we were trying to do, which was, again, to sort of combat the mass media portrayal of Afghanistan as a place of conflict and look at it through a number of different photographers' perspectives, and through that amalgamation, get a more well-rounded picture. Personal truths, but a number of personal truths. We released that on our website, daylightbooks.org, and we have over 60 different multimedia pieces there. They're available for free to watch. They're great teaching tools. I cite them all the time. Please go ahead and check them out on our website, daylightbooks.org. We don't have the time to talk much more about the multimedia program, so we're going to jump over.
Well, I'll say one quick thing, is that we always sought to expand audience for the work of these incredible image makers. And the multimedia program for us represented a real turning point in that we could make this work infinitely accessible. We could make it, in some sense, archived digitally. And we eventually did a syndication deal with the Telegraph in the UK for the multimedia program to expand audience. And in that way, it began to kind of define this perspective that I think we still maintain and explore daily relative to the importance of both digital media and digital archive, as well as that of print. And we have continued over the last 6 or 7 years to invest heavily in both areas and to see a legitimate place for both moving forward.
Yeah, the cross-platform approach is something we're going to return to in just a couple minutes, but we're going to stay with the print material first. This is just a small selection of some of the books that we've done. We're at about 50 books at this point. Tomorrow at Photoville, if anybody is not going to be here, we're launching 7 new titles. In fact, we have some flyers to hand out to folks with just the covers of the new books. We'd love to get them into your hands and explore those a little bit more, maybe in the breakout sessions. So we distribute with DAP, which is an excellent art book distributor. And there is a fun little project we thought we'd sort of highlight for people here. This has to do with the first book that we did along with Carta Editions out of Milan. The artist Bruce Haley is sort of an old school war photographer, and we went on press with him in Italy and had a great time producing a beautiful hardbound book. It was our first book. It was a lot of fun to do. And we sent a bunch of copies around, as we do. We work with some amazing publicity people. And one of the folks that ended up with the book was a friend of Bruce Haley's, a gentleman named Jorg Kohlberg. Some of you might be familiar from Conscientious Extended, one of the first luminary bloggers that focused on photography. So Bruce sent Jorg a copy of his book and asked him to sort of slice and dice it and put his own spin on it. And this is not something we encourage everyone to do with our books, of course, but it's really interesting to see what Jorg came up with. And I'll just scroll through some of the things. So, embracing some of the things that Bruce was working on, which is sort of aping this agitprop aesthetic, Jorg fully embraced this and, in fact, had quotes from Stalin and Lenin and really just went whole hog in this direction.
Bruce's work, Sunder, looks at the decline of the Soviet Empire over the course of about a decade. And while he was on assignment for various journals and magazines, newspapers, he would always stay on a few days once he was in Eastern Europe and in Russia and make this work. And so it was this personal project that he had produced over the course of almost a decade that then we helped compile into this beautiful publication. And Andrei Kudrescu wrote for the book and gave this very interesting historical sort of poetic textual contribution. So so Jorg really riffed on the history of image-based representation in the former Soviet bloc countries.
And it was nice for us to think about the book as not being the final resting place, but actually part of this dialogue. And this is something we're kind of committed to in one form or another, not necessarily collaging the books, but just the books as being sort of the beginning of a longer conversation. Speaking of conversation, one of our most well-known projects, some people in the audience might be familiar with it, it's called Photographs Not Taken. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. I'm not sure if the audio file's loaded. It is. Okay. Well, we're not going to play it. We have available on our website. Okay, so this book, which was spearheaded by Will Stacy, who's a great photographer, includes over 60 photographers writing about missed opportunities, photographs that were never taken. So the book is a small paperback, $15, and it's over 60 first-person short anecdotes. It's super accessible. My mom loves it. It's it's great for students. It's really a really cool project. We're very excited about it.
We've now collaborated with publishers all over the world and licensed the rights to the book to many international publishers that have done foreign language editions of the book. So it's widely circulated, widely available, and yeah, for those who teach, a phenomenal teaching tool, particularly when you're not very prepared for class.
One of the things that we try to do to encourage people to send us their work. I mean, Taj and I travel all the time. We go to portfolio reviews. We talk to people about their bodies of work. And one of the things we do is run a photo awards program, which we started with CDS about 5 years ago, and we've since split off and gone our own way. And we encourage people, students and amateurs and professionals, to send us their work. It's a very small, it's $35 submission fee, and we look at the work, and we're able to provide a set of books and a solo show in our gallery in North Carolina. This was an outdoor show that we did with Brian Scootmott with this work that folks might be familiar with as well, and he was the winner, I believe it was 2013, not last year. So moving right along, we're almost done. There's one thing we got to save some space for. This is, on the top left, is a Slide Luck Pot Show collaboration that we did in Panama City when I was living down there in 2008. And below that is a screening that we did at our space down in Hillsborough, North Carolina, outside of Durham. And we have events every last Friday, and we do exhibition openings and music and screenings and what have you. So we've been very interested in creating a community more recently that's not just online or at these events, but actually trying to host the conversation and create a place where we can have some face-to-face conversation. And that's one reason why we're so excited to be here at APAG and to talk to you folks at Heartland Brewery and the breakout session and really sort of figure out what you guys are interested in these days and how it might dovetail with what we're doing.
Yeah, the living archive. I mean, as we know, so many archives are somewhat inaccessible and so full of incredible resource. And so we're always looking for opportunities through community-based events, collaborations with museums, with other publishing institutions, with universities, with archives, in creating programmatic activities that make these seemingly inaccessible accessible, and that bring into the light these incredibly rich materials.
So I promised we were going to get back to our digital program. This is the last thing we have to present to you guys tonight. We started publishing digital teasers of the books and other material that we are working on. I'm going to transition to the web. I'm assuming I'm going to be able to do that here, right? Switch over to the web browser. It's not up, but maybe if I drag it over. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'll pull up one, Taj. I'll let you drive here.
Okay. Yeah, so as we really began to evolve the book publishing program, we kind of swung the pendulum back into the digital realm such that we could create a similar experience on the screen to the one that we have in the physical world surrounding visual material and visual narrative. And so we kind of deconstructed the process by which we typically experience photographic material in the physical world, namely within the context of a museum, a gallery, an archive, a beautifully produced print book. And we noticed that the recurring theme was the world through design, whether it's of space or using print media, the world kind of vanishes, and we're left with nothing but the imagery and the information being communicated through that imagery. So we thought if we could take a similar user experience design within the digital environment and carve out this reverent space in the ever cluttered world of the internet, we might get at a similar physical experience. And so we collaborated with some incredible technologists and digital designers and architected a platform, a publishing platform, that makes the production of immersive, rich media content quite accessible. And so this is the resulting digital publication asset. It's published into the web. It's delivered as an HTML5 asset, and it's responsively designed. So it's optimized for mobile, for tablet, for desktop, for laptop, for projection in a presentation context. And it incorporates rich media, so it supports up to 4K quality visuals, be they video-based or photographic. It connects to social media such that imagery can be shared, and there can be the associated copyright information and linking via anchor tags back to the source material. The platform publishes these rich media publications into the website that is being run by the institution, the partner, such that it supports the creation of owned media assets and continues this process of adding to the archive and making it accessible via this digital platform. So we have now, in the last probably 2 years, fully built out the platform with a team of incredible technologists, and we've made it accessible so that organizations can create an account and subscribe to the platform, gain access to the CMS, the content management system, the publishing tools, the distribution associated therewith, and then bring their material to the platform to very easily and quickly lay out and publish content that looks and feels and functions like this. And so we have found this as a really powerful tool to do things that we can't do in print, to go beyond print, but also return to it and reference it. And so for many of our print publications, we're now increasingly producing these rich media digital publications as companions, whether it's including interviews with the artist or video footage of them in the field. We are having a lot of fun and doing a lot of incredible work to continually push the conversation relative to print media and digital media and what that means for the archive in its future. So we could go on, but we...
So on our website, daylightbooks.org, you just click on digital, and you're taken to this page with over 20 of these stories. Again, it's all free content, and we're putting it there to partly help entice sales, but also, as Taj has described, really embrace the digital space as a place to look at these amazing photographs and not lose any of their value, not lose any of their potency. And this has been an itch that I'll bet many in this room have tried to scratch, and I'm hoping that we're doing it right. It's a difficult task, and we've taken it on.
And for those of you who are interested in the platform for the institution that you're working with, please just chat with us during one of the social sessions or the breakout session, and we can share information with you about how that works and all the associated pricing and rights and all that stuff. It's a very, the idea when we spun this out as a separate platform for others to use was to create a very easy, very accessible, but very powerful technology platform. And that's exactly what we've done. So for those of you who do have interest in using the technology, please just chat with us and we can set up a focused conversation about that.
The final thing that I will say is you guys might have noticed by now that we focus a lot on younger artists and emerging artists. We have worked with historical material in the past, and we're actually very interested in trying to make our program more robust via the introduction of material that is a little bit more dated, a little bit more historically potent. And so that's one reason we wanted to come and be a part of this conversation today. So thank you for listening to us, and Gail for joining us here. I hope you guys have some great questions. We'll be right over here.
Wow, that was interesting. Thank you very much. Yes. Do we have questions? Do we want to go straight to... Yes, we do. Okay, great. Okay. Right here.
Thanks. That was really...
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing for all of you. And Gail, you were back at my archive like 15 years ago, so it's true. She
right.
goes to every archive. So I'm interested, Taj and Michael, that was fantastic. For your print publications, what's your funding model?
Yeah, great question. The $1 million question.
Without $1 million.
Yeah, I wish it. Well, okay. So, like any arts nonprofit, we are supported by grants. We've received support from the NEA and the Ford Foundation and numerous personal donations and smaller businesses. We also work with the subvention model, which is not unfamiliar to most of you, I imagine, that have been privy to the art publishing business. So it's essentially, we do what we can to shore up as much as we can, and then work with the artist or institution to get the rest of the kitty in the pot and create some amazing books.
Yeah, as you're probably well aware, I mean, from a financial perspective, a successful publication in this context is one that breaks even at the end of the day. And so provided we can co-invest with the content holder, identify enough of a market such that Daylight's investment can be offset through distributed sales, and we can deliver the appropriate number of finished publications to the collaborator, to the content holder, for their financial investment. More often than not, everything works out really well, but we've got to share the burden, otherwise it's impossible. And then, if a book is successful and we're able to go into subsequent, printings and perhaps subsequent editions, that's when, there may be some revenue that's generated beyond the cost of production. So we're always looking for books that go into multiple print runs, and we have experienced that with a number of our titles. It is the exception.
Yourself, or do you work with outside designers?
We work with one designer in particular that I was with at Aperture back in the day, and she's been with us for over 7 years, and she's the creative director of the books program. We have worked with outside designers as well that are brought in by the other artist or institution, but we prefer to sort of keep it in-house and keep the aesthetics, on par with the rest of our output.
We're a very collaborative publisher in that I think being image makers and having had books of our own work published by European art presses ourselves, we've kind of lived the pain of, you know, the publishing process. And so we always sort of start with the vision that the content holder has for their work in print, and then we seek to realize that together. And if that involves another designer that they're comfortable with, they've worked with in the past, then provided our creative director is involved in that process and ensuring that it's consistent with the overall sort of style of our publishing program, we're always open to collaborations.
How do you decide what you publish, and do you have a typical print run?
The curatorial aspect of what we do is, at least for me, still one of the most important and fun things. You know, we look at submissions from the Daylight Photo Awards. We're traveling all the time, as I mentioned, and looking at work, and we try and curate each list either around a specific theme, which at this point rarely is the case, or around bodies of work that we think are personally relevant and interesting and of the moment.
Could you define of the moment?
Can any of us? I think we can do a very good job of that, actually. And because we're always looking and we're always traveling and talking to people and looking at exhibitions, I'd like to think that our output sort of represents things. There's just, for example, 2 of the books coming out tomorrow that are sort of being shown on screen here have to do with the trans community and the LGBTQ community. So just one example of how we can take sort of social political themes and try and be just sensitive to the fact that artists are much more interested in working with those ideas. And we are but stewards. This really is a platform that we're trying to, we really try and respect that. If an artist has an idea and a vision and it's salient, it makes sense to us, we'll try and find a way to make it work.
Our publishing program is very much a reflection of who we are and who the artists that we're familiar with are and the collective ideas that we share. And so we're always looking at work, and we're collaborating with institutions all over the world, and we're really fortunate to be in the position that we are in that regard. And so I feel like we in this inherent way have our finger on the pulse of photographic practice today. And yet we also have sort of formal and historic training. And so we're always bringing those perspectives to the contemporary work that we're experiencing. And so there's no science to the process as far as our editorial or curatorial program, but it's very much a reflection of what we're sensing as being important relative to the conversations happening today with the medium.
I just want to make one.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 second. What's your typical print run?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Do you have a typical print run?
Yeah, somewhere between around 1,500, roughly. Sometimes it depends. At this point, we're trying to dial in a little bit deeper as to the market value of each project. And so some titles are a little bit more specialized, and in which case we'll reduce the print run. Some, like Photographs Not Taken, smaller trim size, more accessible price point, we'll print a lot more of those, and they do sell.
So yeah, as far as the more substantial kind of image-based books, it's typically between 1,500 and 5,000, depending on who the partner is and how well known the artist may be. If the book has a museum exhibition associated with it, we're increasingly working with collections and with museums, particularly relative to the idea of the exhibition catalog going through a lot of change right now, and all of our publications are what we refer to as evergreen, and so institutions that are interested in producing a print companion to an exhibition, namely one that doesn't just kind of document this 6-month show, but rather seeks to contribute in perpetuity, are institutions that we're really interested in collaborating with. And in those instances, we typically have to expand the print run because there's a much larger audience for the work.
Right. I want to just make a couple of comments that many of you, if you are trying to get a publisher, an easy way out has traditionally been, well, get an exhibition and then we can discuss, a book. And I think what you're doing which is incredibly wonderful, is because you curate these wonderful presentations online, you are actually doing something other than just a traditional museum show, and it's enlarging the possibilities without, the real estate in museums is so valuable. To get a wall in a museum, I mean, there's not enough space, and we're all trying to get it. The last two big exhibitions I have done and am doing, I would not let the Brooklyn Museum publish a catalog. They wanted to in the worst way. We're a museum, we publish catalogs, but that was not to my best interest. And you just addressed this point. Museum catalogs often have a very short shelf life. They're smaller print runs than trade book, but it isn't considered a long-lasting publication. And an interesting example, my exhibition, which is going to be on at the Brooklyn Museum for 6 months, which is unprecedented, is also going to go to the International Olympic Committee Museum, the Olympic Museum in Lausanne. And the IOC, which is nobody I've ever worked with before, said, "Oh, we are so happy you are doing a real book. We are only interested in real books. We don't like museum catalogs." Now, I had never heard that before. I was doing it because I wanted more control over my book. I did not want it to just, I'm an author. And the Brooklyn Museum said, "We'll find you a publisher." I don't need Brooklyn to find me a publisher after 15 years. They said, "Well, we do catalogs." I said, "I'm actually an author, and who publishes me is very important." And I like Knopf. I mean, it's a very distinguished, highbrow publisher. If I'm doing lowbrow subjects, I want a highbrow publisher. And, they were annoyed, but the Daylight is a totally different model. But within my world of museums and traditional book publishing, I also have to find different models because the old ways just don't work anymore. On the outside, they may not look so new, but really the way things have been done in the past are no longer possible. I mean, they're just not viable.
Yeah, it's very true.
Any more questions?
Who do you guys see, who are you in communication with? Who inspires you in this field? Who challenges you? Who do you relate to?
That's a great question, because I think as we've sort of concretized the program, there's been some necessary blinders that we've put on. The New York Art Book Fair, for example, is happening right now up in Long Island City, and we haven't been up there yet. We'd like to go up and check out what's going on. I mean, the reality is that the state of art books right now is very exciting. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of rules being broken. There's a lot of new players. So I think my first reaction to that question is I'd like to find some new ones, because I feel like we've sort of built our model based on our early, our mentors, people like Joel Sternfeld and people that we study with and really respect and love. And we're always looking for more inspiration. We're always looking for those that can represent another model, another path forward.
Just personally, I've found that, my love of photography is still, it's part of my identity. But I have found in recent years that, as far as inspiration, I'm drawing a lot from artists working with other media. And I always bring this sort of photographic perspective and, in a way, return to the photograph through, broadening my horizons. But I've recently fallen in love with poetry again. And I think that there was, for the first maybe 9 or 10 years of what we were doing, there was this, hyper-focused attention on photography and photography alone. And more, I think, to the question earlier, as we've seen the medium of photography go through such changes relative to digital media and digital manipulation, and so much of contemporary dialogue relative to the medium being obsessed with the relationship between painting and photography as it relates to digital manipulation. There has been this kind of opening up and almost like this like freedom to recognize that photography is part of something much greater, which is visual representation and documentation. And so so more and more I find that I draw influence outside the medium.
Anyone else? Everyone want to take a break? Have a little freshen up, have a coffee, glass of water, and then we can hit these guys up again later when you remember the rest of your questions. I have some for them. Thank you.
Yeah.